It's 88.5 FM, and what a treat to be able to welcome Johnny Marr to the airwaves. How are you, Johnny?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be here.
Well, it's great to have you in here. We're excited. The forthcoming album, Call the Comet, comes out in just over a little week's time on June 15th.
15, yeah.
Call the Comet is the name of the new album. We've heard a couple of tracks. We'll talk about those. You're also going to be playing in Los Angeles October 4th at the theater at the Ace Hotel. And a couple of days before that, September 29th at Ohana Fest down in Dana Point. We'll talk about those tour dates as well. Let's talk about the making of the new album called The Comet. You spent a period of time in Crazy Face Studios in Manchester. Apparently you were envisioning the world as it is and one that possibly one day could be. Is that a fair?
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah, I was actually trying to, maybe on some of the songs I'm envisaging the way the world could be for people like me, and I think people who are like me and maybe listen to the record, probably because I didn't want to envisage the world as it is, really. Making the record was just happened to remind me that my life as a musician and as a creative person, part of it when I was a youngster was the appeal of escape, and I know I'm very lucky that my chosen work is escape. I try and be a responsible person. I try and be got a good work ethic, and I try and be a responsible member of society and all of that. But the way things were going over the last couple of years politically, when I went into the record, I was like, how am I going to avoid this? And I just really didn't want to make a political record. But because I tend to draw from what I see outside. I don't want every single song to be about me and my life or me and my relationships. On my solo stuff, I've really been drawn to writing about cities and society and stuff. Nothing too overtly political. I thought, well, that's what I like to do. Don't want everything to be about myself. So I ended up, I guess, coming up with a few imaginary kind of cities. There's a song called The Tracers, which the album title called The Comet comes from, and the idea of that song is almost like a sci-fi clarion call to some outside force or agents to come and reset us. Not, Call the Comet it was a sort of natural sort of phrase that I came up with in the middle of the night as almost like a plea for mankind to go, we've tried religion, we've tried politics, it ain't working, capitalism isn't working, all of this, whatever we're doing, it plainly, it's not all doom and gloom out there, but there's definitely things that we're all feeling and it's not working. And I just had this sort of weird subconscious thing about, as it happens with religion, I thought, well, if people can call out to some imaginary force in the sky, then I can imagine this other imaginary force. And it's just a story for a song. So that's the kind of thing that some of the songs are based on. This, in a way, it's a little bit of, I guess it's a positivity in a way. It's a way of not looking at what we've got here and, analysing it and, commenting on it and making this political statement. It's more about this song Rise, for example, that opens the record, is what would happen if two people were faced with building a new society. And it's really about idealism of friendship, and we can do this, and if you believe in me, it's that kind of, so it's a little bit of a fist in the air and a clarion call rather than a downbeat kind of view of society.
You talk about point of view, and you were trying to find an honest point of view. And there's when you mentioned clarion call, there's the spiritual basis of that too, where it's civil and compassionate. And is that too much to ask for?
That's nice to think about, to be honest. I think that's right. The thing that I've got, against on a personal level, I'm often, you maybe imagine to be, because of the times that I came out of with the Smiths, and it was a very, you had Reaganomics here, and we had, the Thatcherism in the UK, which we're now seeing the result of, because I came out of that movement of musicians that were, say, socially aware and made some sort of comment. Now 30 odd years later, I'm often asked about, how I feel about those things, and the world's very different now, and a lot of artists don't comment on that. And whether I'm often asked whether I feel that the artist has a responsibility to call out those things. I don't believe that artist has got a responsibility to anything other than to make whatever the art is, and if that art is abstract, then whatever. But just to pick up on your point, my problem with the things that are against that is just, where's the kindness?
Yeah.
I can sit with someone, if you want to debate with me for 2 hours about your political side and why your political position is different from mine, and go into economics and all of that, then okay, I'll hear you. We might have a disagreement, but the bottom line is, I think, with regards to a lot of the things that we see in society, with those sort of divisions, those sort of arguments and debates, you can put those aside and just go, well, where's the kindness?
And it clearly, the album does touch a lot of ground, pardon the pun, some on this earth and some on perhaps another sphere. The building itself, apparently, you spent time, a good chunk of time, 8-9 months, more or less, putting the record together. And apparently the building you were in had its own impact on you as you just traveled around it.
Yeah, no, that's right. The record has definitely has been inspired by the fact that I'm working on the top floor of an old factory. It's I'm not sure they're all over the United States, but when people think of Cleveland, for example,
I'm from Cleveland,
and you'll know then.
Yes, I will.
When people think of those places, or Ohio, and those.
You're speaking to my roots.
Yeah, those those spaces now that I guess people associate with musicians like Pere Ubu and in my case, in the Human League in the UK, the industrial movement of the early 80s, those spaces as we all know, are very hard to find these days. I moved into this big factory space, and that industrial environment had an impact on a number of the songs. In that my process was like, I got an old drum machine from the 80s, and I put it through a bunch of guitar pedals and played it through these pedals and moved the dials and recorded that. Now you can, as we all know, you can assimilate that with a mouse on a screen moving that around, but it just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't sound the same, and the process was an industrial process. And so then there's a couple of tracks that I did that, and then I built the song on top of these pretty atmospheric industrial, UK industrial, not so much like over here. When people say industrial, you think of Nine Inch Nails and that kind of thing. The kind of UK version of that. So and then it's my job then to put a story on that, sing on it, and put the guitars on it. And I really liked it. But yeah, the studio definitely brought that out. And then as well, I did something that I thought I was long over, which was I didn't even move my bed in there. I just turned the couch into the bed, and I ended up sleeping a lot in the studio, which I really thought I was way beyond, but the record just pulled me into that thing. I just didn't want to lose the muse. So I would find, on some of the songs, I would find myself walking around this huge old factory, the completely deserted factory at 4:30 in the morning. Everybody left, getting the spook, to be honest with you. And it's in one or two of the tracks.
And that you mentioned, I'm from Youngstown, actually. And by the way, if you ever want to capture what you're talking about, one of the members of the War on Drugs is refurbishing the Peppermint Studios in Youngstown. And if you need post-apocalypse to surround you for any influence,
that's still there,
would
is
be
it?
the place to go to.
Oh, yeah. No, I know about Youngstown, yeah.
Well, so then I can relate to the post-industrial, and it does create, at times, a sense of what was and what has happened, because there is, in the case of some of those industrial cities, it's where did it go? As Chrissy Hine once wrote, "My city is gone."
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the short answer is it started with Reaganomics, and it got whatever that started. I guess it was a political black hole that sucked a whole lot of stuff in and spewed out what we now have, I guess.
But if we think about it, and you know, as you talk, I realize that rock and roll, in many ways, you know, did come from that sense of what about us and what's going on, and there was a sense of not a sense of, there was a pure attitude of rebellion, and everything there was questioning the status quo. That was what it was for in the beginning.
I've noticed over the years that I think that what you're bringing up is a very that America and fans of American music are very attuned to that. I say that with complete admiration, because you could look at rock and roll as just being an outgrowing of the entertainment scene for usually working people or working class or lower economical people, you know, from the 20s onwards, you know, and beyond, really, and how it grew from the jazz age and all of that sort of stuff. So you can look at it as pure entertainment that would then happen to be hijacked by teenagers, and then the whole post-war, what happened with the technology in the post-war. So there is a less sort of philosophical way of, and a more dry sociological way of looking at where we've got to now through the rock and roll, and that's fine too. But what interests me is that the American sensibility never divorces it from rebellion. I think that's so great.
At the same time, community, because it was like,
it's so great, and that's why Elvis Presley was so important.
Yeah.
And thank you, by the way, for introducing me to the Mountain Valley Spring Water.
Cheers. Some Elvis water.
The nectar of the king. So I've discovered today. But no, I find it's, it's run right the way through. You know, as an adult now, I've started coming to the United States with the Smiths when in '82. You know, when I was 19 and or '83, and I've been coming and involved in the music culture for 30 odd years, and that it's never really lost. No matter what, you know, we all think that, you know, there's a lot of the past of music. You know, there's things that we've lost, you know, with the passage of time, and you know, there's a lot of great. I actually like living in the modern world, but it interests me that the rock and roll rebellion and I guess, you know, the standing up for the little guy and that sense of righting injustices and having your voice is I'm telling you, as a European, it's something that you Americans are take to heart, and I've always really liked that.
You mentioned religion earlier on. That's one form of religion, particularly if you're from the industrial Midwest. It does not go away.
Well, I've got, I'll show you later, but I've got a tattoo there of the 45 RPM logo from a Motown Four Tops record on my arm, and that's because I've got a Shiva symbol on the other, and it's to remind me that the culture that I grew up with of buying 45s and what that meant to me and my imagination and in my life was a religion. And if I ever get so holy or wise or stupid in my old age that I forget that, I've always got that reminder.
You can put Mickey's Monkey on the turntable and you get grounded.
That dumb rock and roll was the height of my aspirations, and I'm really proud of that. I think that's great.
The album, does cover a lot of ground. You mentioned Tracers, which, obviously was that clarion call. Walk Into the Sea, which is another one of the tracks you released earlier for us to share with the audience. That's an epic opus. Opus.
Yeah,
it's almost alliteration. And then Hey Angel, because you're looking at a guy who grew up on Roxy and Bowie and T-Rex. It feels like I need to get my platform shoes out for that one.
Well, the guitar solo in Hey Angel, there's a motive that comes in. When I wrote it in the arrangement, it was called the glam break. Yeah, so you got that right, really. Yeah.
And Hi Hello, which I noticed in the video that you've put out of High Hello, a number of people who view the video keep commenting on the beauty of your guitar in the video. And we would be remiss to not point out, when I mentioned earlier, as we were getting set to do the interview, I have your book, Set the Boy Free, which you put out a year or so ago, and I was paging through it again to refresh myself on more of the personal, viewpoint. And there's a stretch in the book where you make it sound like you're basically going down the street and waving, and suddenly you're playing with electronic, the Modest Mouse, the Pretenders, the Cribs, Seven Worlds Collide, Paul McCartney, Brian Ferry, Beck, Hans Zimmer, the Healers. Am I forgetting any other?
Kirsty MacColl,
Talking Heads,
Billy Bragg. That was all at that same time. Yeah.
How does as a musician, as a kid, you were talking moments ago about 1983 and getting your head around, touring the world. How does being asked to play with, or asking someone to play with, and having all that come together, one can't expect that in the course of a life?
Oh, absolutely not. No, I certainly didn't expect it. And it's an interesting question that's never been. Even when I was writing the book, I was trying to explain what was happening from when the Smiths split. First off, just as a start into this period, when the Smiths split, I genuinely and sincerely looked at and had to expect that I was going to go back to living at my parents' house and playing in some really little band. I mean, genuinely was worried that
realistic, pragmatic expectations.
Yeah. I had to really look at that because I didn't want to, not consider that. And I thought that was a very real possibility. Maybe it was a paranoia. So that said, that was in 87. Then from 88 onwards, this period you're talking about and this situation where I found myself in, they were my favourite rock band, and there's a whole backstory to that I was going to be in that group before the Smiths even, at 17. Found myself working with one of my best friends, Matt Johnson, and and then at the same time forming a group with Bernard Sumner from New Order, because New Order had decided to take this hiatus, and Bernard said to me, let's do a duo. And still, because I'd played these shows with Chrissie Hynde, I was literally 3 groups at the same time. And then working on my dear, dear friend Kirsty MacColl's record, which is a very intense and very important record called Kite, which we put this group together for that. So that was like her session group. All of those things were happening at once. And building a studio in my own house so electronic could work there. So the fact is I was going from the 3 or 4 days a week in London, which was this real brotherhood in this studio, and we were like cocooned in Air Studio, a very famous studio on Oxford Street, making this Mind Bomb album, and we were taking a lot of psychedelics and really on this mission. And then on the weekend, me and my roadie would get in the car and I'd drive up to Manchester, go up the highway, and go to Manchester, which was blowing up every weekend, the Hacienda, which was also on psychedelics, and then making in my home studio, working on songs.
24-hour party, people.
With Bernard Sumner from New Order. He and I were making this new kind of music. And Pet Shop Boys were coming up to visit. And then Kirsty would call me a couple of days later and like, have you got a song? And all of that. It was pretty heady stuff, but and the background to all of that was in the music industry and in the music press, which is very, very a big part of my existence. I was only 24 at this time. It was all about the Smiths split, and in a way, all of that crazy activity that was going on helped me deal with the Smiths split in a way. Because if I had not been doing that stuff, I would have been waking up every day, and without being too dramatic or too much of a baby about it, in certain parts of the world, I was Public Enemy #1, or I felt that way. Like I was really, really, I was getting a good kicking from the British, UK music press, and some parts of the US music press, whatever. And but I was making all these records now, because I was making records that actually now still sound pretty good. That was my battle, really. That was me getting in the
It was
trenches.
validation too, right? I mean,
Yeah, it was
because if you
validation to
sat there,
myself.
you would be sitting there getting slagged on, and
Yeah.
instead you immerse yourself in creating and working, and as you mentioned earlier, an important word is finding camaraderie with a lot of these musicians.
Oh, yeah.
And it got pure, I imagine.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. You know, the Smith split was heartbreak. Guys, you know, as anyone could imagine, intense relationship. We all loved each other. It came to an end. There was no way around that. It was a sad thing. It was heartbreaking for me. You know, so much has been said about it. But I was put in a position that I couldn't get out of, really. I didn't just waltz out of there. And I didn't want to say all that at the time. But yeah, so it was heartbreaking, the end of the friendships and all of that. But then to be working with these, I got very lucky to be, you know, you can drop names like, you know, you can say, oh, Paul McCartney called me and all of that. So, wow, you know, great. But, and that was incredible. But the bond and the friendship that I had with the guys in The and Kirsty and Electronic and Chrissy Hind, you know, those relationships, friendships really kind of kept my head together, you know, and so that's the background. When you have that whole list of those songs and those records I was making at that time, yeah, it's about the music, but there was a very, you know, I was in this sort of very much in an emotional whirlpool there. You know?
But it also speaks to what we talk about, how on one level, you know, a great rock band is a real sense of community. That, you know, we're in this together.
That's how I've been in so many bands. There's a brotherhood there, you know. With Modest Mouse, we made this record, and having written over a year intensively rehearsing and writing 19 songs, and then going in the studio in Mississippi and in insane heat with equipment breaking down and all this, and you go. It's like being in.
I'm getting sweaty just hearing this story.
Yeah, it was like being in the forces together, you know, and I've been in bands with plenty of girls too. It's the same thing, you know, and you know, you go through this thing. It's like being on a submarine or something together, and you get this brotherhood or camaraderie, and it would have just been too weird for me to bail. You know, in the UK, it was like, well, what's Johnny Marr doing now? He's joined this weirdo band from Portland who they were big news here, but people didn't really know of him, and only really clued up people knew of him in the UK when I joined Modest Mouse. It's like he's in some band like with 5 guys with beards and all tattoos and all of this business. And but I just always makes sense to me. I follow the music. If I'm making amazing music, whether it's with the Cribs or the or whatever, my life becomes about that. It becomes about that camaraderie. It becomes about getting on the boat. We do it together. We go down. You know, it's a bit apocalypse now. You don't get off the boat. You go down there. And then when the time comes to tour, I'm not going to say, hey, fellas, I love you, but I'm out of here.
Into the van.
Get in the van or get on the bus or whatever.
Took away, no more, no good today.
You've had a band with you, and you have this being your 3rd solo LP.
Yeah.
You've clearly established yourself as a solo artist, and do you ever feel? I want to make sure I ask this question correctly. Would it be enough for you now, having had all these opportunities either presented to you or you sought out, would it be enough for you to do one thing, i.e. just do you, the Healers, the band? Or have you gotten accustomed to or need that sense of interaction with all these different creative artists?
Well, it probably wouldn't be enough because of that word you use, accustomed. It's not that I have ambition to... so, for example, it's quite likely that I will continue to do some film work with Hans Zimmer because I love the man, and he's, you know, we've got a very close friendship, and I just imagine that's in my stars. Me and my band, what I've done here with the solo records is my day job. And when you were asking that question then, I thought, oh, no, the answer is yes, this is enough for me. But by the time, you know, you finish the answer, the question, I thought, you know, and after 30 years of all these different projects and being invited to work with different people, it's probably unlikely that I would just still stick to the one thing.
Variety is the spice of life.
It has been for me, you know. Whenever I've been asked over the years, I've always been asked, okay, is there any people you want to work with? Are there any people you want to work with? I always was like, I can't think of whoever that person is. But then Beck would want to have me on a track or something. I go, well, cool, yeah, Beck's really cool. I'm going to do something with Beck. Or so.
Did you ever have anyone who, to that point, not to get too, Entertainment Tonight here, but was there ever an opportunity presented to you by someone who you really admired where you just couldn't break away to work with them?
Well, Lou Reed died. Lou Reed asked me to, would I be interested in playing with him, and he died. So that was a little bit of a
that would qualify
scheduling problem.
Yeah, to say the least.
And I would have loved to have played with Lou Reed because he's possibly my favourite writer, you know. So a couple
Do you
of
ever
those things
stop and think? I know you don't want to. You even talked about in writing of the book you didn't want to seem like you were a name dropper, and you were very conscientious about that. But I can't help but think, there's a reason why all these legendary people, and in some cases very great new acts that were being formed, wanted you to play with them. It's because of your abilities as a musician.
Well, that's very nice of you to say that. I don't. False modesty aside, that has to be pointed out to me. You know, I always assume it's because there's a record that I made that they like, which I suppose is the same thing.
See, if you keep making records with a bunch of people, then that propagates itself. A lot of people then like something you did.
Hey, well, it's starting to happen now that some people, younger people, are getting to know some of my older stuff because of the solo thing. I had this song off the last record called "Easy Money," which was a big hit in the UK.
And here on 88.5 FM, by the way.
Thank you. That's
in
great.
Los Angeles. We're carrying the flag in Los Angeles. Don't worry.
And that, I've been in bands a lot. I've been doing this long enough now to know that when you play, a certain song on stage, you play a certain song and a bunch of the audience just really react to that song. And "Easy Money" became one of those songs. And then you get younger audiences now who they know of my older stuff, the and the Smiths, because they got into "Easy Money," and now they're getting into "Hi Hello" because that's kind of picking up a lot of sort of attention. So it's that's an amazing thing. So those, it's all part of. I just kind of follow. I just follow my musical instincts, really.
Ever expanding.
Yeah. I always follow that, and sometimes it seems, looking at it from the outside, that would send me down some weird little dirt track or some weird little side road. Now, 30-odd years later, I think people, they get it. They go, oh, yeah, man, yeah, of course, why wouldn't he be in the... Well, at the time, people were like, what are you doing? You've left this band that's having all these hits and playing these, about to really break through to... it was always like, you could have been as big as U2. You could have been as big as U2. I was like, well, I want to be in the. I want to make records with Pet Shop Boys. And
now you've got me thinking that the next call you're going to get is from Bono.
He doesn't. Hey, believe me, the Edge makes plenty. He makes a big.
It doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to have a friend come aboard and
big enough sound on his own. Yeah. But no, it all made sense to me at the time. But it's because I was following my musical intuition. And it's never been about. I think people now know that's my MO, but I understand that may have been confusing because the archetype of the guitar player who was known from the 4-piece UK band, he doesn't do that. you know, I've got a lot in common with Peter Buck and a lot in common with The Edge and a lot in common with Keith Richards and people like that. But there's half of me is completely different. That has more in common with Nile Rodgers and Brian Eno. And I always knew that. It's just, it took 30 years for people to for the penny to drop.
Well,
with some people, not with everybody.
It certainly, and I would be remiss to not let fans of Johnny Marr, if you aren't aware of Set the Boy Free, the book we've referred to, it certainly will give you, it's like a fan letter to the world where you do express the joy and sometimes the challenges of what you faced, but there is always, as you keep saying, the mission of music that is so integral to your life. And now the new album, called The Comet, is something that, you know, it's going to stand up with its best work. You only have to wait. You can pre-order it now if you'd like, which we would recommend to all our listeners out there. It will be released in a week. They have some tracks that you get if you pre-order it. I prefer, actually, you to go to a record store and buy a physical copy because I'm a Luddite.
The cover's really nice. You know, the artwork, the sleeve of the 12-inch, I will say that, you know, is... if I want to make some vinyl, I'm not going to miss the opportunity to try and make it as beautiful as I possibly can, you know, but without it being like a $200 deal, you know what I mean? So just a nice record. I still believe that's.
We
a
still
nice
like
thing.
looking at them, don't we?
Oh man, it's great.
You take it in more. You focus more.
But I also imagine when I'm going into a record, okay, you know, I understand about streaming, and I use streaming, and I listen to online radio like everybody. Whatever, but when I go into making a record, you know, the format of, in my mind, I hang my work, my collection of songs on this 10, 11, whatever it is, journey of songs on an album. I don't go so far as to think, okay, right now I have side A and side B, but I have this arc. I think of it as an album. And if that's what it takes for me, in a way, this is going to sound very corny, but that's my canvas, if you like.
Yeah.
It's a little like, or if, you know, I've got quite a few friends who are painters and visual artists, you know, and in a way, you know, it's like having an exhibition and you've got your 11 canvases on there. And if you want to put it in those kind of terms, and if that's what it takes to get me to realize my mind and what it is, it's not a retro thing. It's a very, very useful device for me to make 11 or 12 songs. And the pacing of those songs, I go, okay, now when I
It's
start
like Act 1, 2, 3.
Correct, exactly.
Prologue, epilogue.
If that helps me make a collection of songs, that's great. I'm not going to harp on about, you know, it was better in 1973 or anything like that, because frankly, if you would have told me when I was 15 that at some point in my lifetime, music would drop down from the sky into my pocket at will, I would be like, where's the time machine? Put me in it.
Instant infusion.
Give me that thing, right? So I'm not confused about that. That's a kind of amazing thing. Yeah, but it's a record with a start, a middle, and an end. The one thing I would say about that is it is a fact that I know myself that I really have to check myself that I never lose the ability. I don't want to not have the attention span to sit and listen to for 50 minutes to one artist's one piece of work.
Keen point.
If I couldn't put a PJ Harvey record on from start to finish, I would have thought I'd kind of lost something in my world, really. I have got the 50 minutes attention span to listen to an entire album.
that you know what, you're right, and there's the other side of life too, which requires full attention, and that is the live performance. And as we said, September 29th at Ohana Fest, great lineup, and October 4th at the theater at the Ace Hotel. Now that's where I think we all would agree that no matter what way you, what platform or however you get exposed to music, there's nothing like that communal experience of a live show where, unless you're taking a lot of selfies of yourself, which I've been seeing that a lot, and I just want to take that phone out of their hand.
Yeah.
You know, that's rapt attention. And you got to love getting that buzz, right?
Yeah. But for the longest time, I was quite unusual. I am quite unusual. That for the longest time in my career, I just didn't bother with it. When I started out, that was because I was so fixated on the art of making records,
The studio,
and putting records out. I was that guy, and it always took the singer of whatever band I was in to drag me out on tour, you know. But I got very lucky. The upside of that is that when I did really fall in love with playing live, I was old enough to really appreciate it, man, you know. And
Discipline, too.
yeah, 100%. It's great as a musician, but I actually now, you know, I know that, you know, I've well and truly morphed into the frontman because I'm quite impatient in the studio these days. You know, I'm certainly not that guy who's like wants to be there till 2:30 in the morning. Although having said that, I did move my bed into the studio, as I told you. But no, I wear a lot of hats. But me and my band are. It's kind of obvious. The songs have to sound good live, and they have to be songs that I really, when I sing them, I'm impressed with the words that are coming out of my mouth. And you know, I really like my audience. I genuinely, you know, this was pointed out to me by a journalist that a week ago when I was in the UK. You really like your audience? Well, yeah, I do. You know, I just assume that they're like me. You know, whether they're younger than me or the same age as me, that we've got similar kind of values. And the reason we get out of the house to go and see a band is because it's an experience that you can't get anywhere else, and it's a special experience, you know. And particularly a guy running around playing alt rock where the guitar is the star. There's not too many of us doing that anymore, you know. To be fair, you know, where the front man is really really in love with playing the guitar, you know, and in a modern way, I hope I'm hoping that I can take that tradition, which I've always loved from being a boy, and drop some of the old-fashioned sort of stuff about that, really.
It's imperative. I insist. I insist that you carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, great. Okay, I will. Yeah,
you are hereby charged with those duties.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
We have summoned you to carry that flag forward, Mr. Marr.
It's an honor.
It's been an honor having you here, and your love for music is wonderful. And we're going to share some of the music today with our audience. So we can't thank you enough, and we can't remind our listeners enough. Call the Comet, available for pre-order now. Comes out in a week. September 29th, Ohana Fest. October 4th, the theater at the Ace Hotel. And in between, nothing but good fortune for you, Johnny.
Thank you so much for all of that. It's a real pleasure to be invited, and you know, I love radio. I've always, it was the first thing I really dug about being a public person. You know, I never really did a lot of interviews back in the day. And the first interviews that I enjoyed and the first experiences I had as you know, in doing this kind of thing was always in radio. I've never really forgot that. There's some TV will never be able to deliver, you know.
It's a cool club that you get to be part of.
No, it's a nice one, fellas. It's great to be here. Yeah.
It's Johnny Marr live on 88.5 FM.